I had just gotten home from a long day at work, tired and ready to relax. All I wanted was to finish the leftovers Suri had made, drink a beer, and watch an episode of Chicago Fire. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt something was wrong. "Honey, I'm in the living room. Please come here and sit down. We need to talk," Suri called out, sounding unusually serious. I sighed heavily, feeling a sense of dread creeping in. "I'm coming, dear," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. When I walked into the living room, I saw Suri sitting nervously on the sofa. A half-empty bottle of California red wine was on the table, and she quickly poured herself another glass. Her hands were shaking slightly. I sank into my deep chair, feeling the weight of the day settle in my bones. "What's going on, Suri?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've been your faithful wife and a good mother to our children all my adult life. They're on their own now, so my job is done." I nodded slowly, unsure of where this was heading. "Yeah, I know. You can grate." Shuri took another sip of her wine. "As you know, I was a virgin when we got married." I chuckled awkwardly, trying to lighten the mood. "Me too," I interrupted. But my joke fell flat. She ignored my attempt at humor and pressed on. "Anyway, I'm going away this weekend with a friend." My heart skipped a beat. "What's his name?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you must know, it's Stan. Stanley Carrington, your boss." "I think our son is older than him," I said, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger rising inside me. "Hi, don't be capricious. He's 30. Give me some credit. Anyway, I want to experience other men. I know you love me and will let me take some time off. When it's all over, I'll make it up to you and our lives will move on. For Christ's sake, be realistic. Suri, if you do this, our marriage will end," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "Stop being so melodramatic high. You won't divorce me over this little thing. Besides, it would cost you too much," she replied, rolling her eyes. "That's true, but I would still reject the cheating wife I set my anger boiling over." "Sure," he seemed unfazed. "Also, Stanley will pick me up on Friday evening. I expect you to invite him in." He was a little nervous about it, so I thought seeing that you were okay with it would help him feel better. "Seriously, you want me to entertain your boyfriend while you finish getting ready for your weekend with him?" I asked, shocked. "Yes, that's what I expect from you," she said, finishing her wine. The room fell silent. I felt a storm of emotions inside me: anger, betrayal, disbelief. I looked at Suri, the one I had loved for so many years, and felt like I was staring at a stranger. The unexpected revelation had shattered my world, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The days leading up to Friday felt like walking on a tightrope. The house was filled with a tense silence, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. Suri and I went through our routines, barely speaking. Each word exchanged like a delicate, fragile thing that could shatter at any moment. On Thursday evening, I found myself in the kitchen, absently washing dishes. Suri came in and started making a list for the grocery store. "Do we need more milk?" she asked, her voice neutral, almost businesslike. "Yeah, we're running low," I replied, trying to keep my tone equally detached, "and get some bread too." We continued like this, listing off items we needed, avoiding any real conversation. The unspoken tension between us was like a coiled spring, ready to snap. That night, as we got ready for bed, Shuri broke the silence. "Hi, are you really going to make this difficult?" I looked at her, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger. "I just don't understand how you can be so casual about this. You even care about what it's doing to us." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "I've already explained my reasons. I just need this, okay? It's not about you. It's about me. And what about us? What about our marriage?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Can we not do this right now?" "I'm tired," she said, turning away from me. I watched her climb into bed, feeling more alone than ever. I decided to sleep in the office that night. The pull-up bed wasn't comfortable, but it was better than being close to her. Friday came too quickly. I went through my day at work in a daze, barely able to concentrate. My coworkers noticed I was distracted, but I brushed off their concerns with a forced smile and a vague excuse about being tired. When I got home, the tension was obvious. Suri was busy with last-minute preparations, her suitcase already packed and waiting by the door. I avoided her, retreating to the office to escape the unbearable tension. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. The new melody, a haunting tune, echoed through the house. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, feeling like I was marching to my own execution. "Suri, what was that sound?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. It's the doorbell. Honey, I changed the music, she replied from the bedroom. What is this melody? It's hauntingly familiar. I said more to myself than to her. It's called El Duel, she answered nonchalantly. I don't like it. Please change it later. Now let Stanley in. I need another 15 minutes to get ready. Offer him a drink. He loves bourbon. Of course, dear, I said, the sarcasm in my voice unmistakable. I opened the door to find Stanley standing there with a smug grin on his face. It took every ounce of self-control not to punch him right then and there. Instead, I forced a smile. Stanley, come on in, I said, stepping aside to let him enter. Thanks. Hi. I appreciate this, he said, looking around the house with a curious eye. Would you like a drink? We have bourbon. I offered, my voice strange. That would be great, he replied, settling himself on the sofa as if he owned the place. I poured him a glass, watching his every move with a growing sense of disgust. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, Suri emerged from the bedroom, dressed to the nines and looking radiant. Stanley, you're here. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said, kissing him on the cheek. No problem. Suri, thanks for the drink, he said, raising his glass to me. I forced a smile, feeling the storm brewing inside me. The calm before the inevitable clash was almost over, and I knew that peace would soon shatter, leaving chaos in its wake. Friday night had finally arrived, and the air in the house was thick with tension. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock, each tick echoing like a drumbeat in my head. Suri was still in the bedroom, putting the final touches on her appearance. The doorbell's haunting melody broke the silence, signaling the arrival of Stanley. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Opening it, I was greeted by Stanley's smug grin. It took every ounce of self-control not to lash out at him right there. Stanley, come on in, I said, forcing a smile. Thanks. Hi. I appreciate this, he replied, stepping inside. I led into the living room, offering him a seat. Would you like a drink? We have bourbon. That would be great. Thanks, Stanley said, making himself comfortable on the sofa. I poured him a glass, the tension in the room almost palpable. Here you go, I said, handing him the drink. Cheers. Hi, he said, raising his glass. Cheers, I replied, my voice strained. Minutes felt like hours as we sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of the clock. Finally, Suri emerged from the bedroom, looking radiant and ready for her weekend away. Stanley, you're here. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said, kissing him on the cheek. No problem, Suri. Thanks for the drink. Hi, he said, raising his glass to me again. I nodded, my stomach churning. The sight of them together, so comfortable and familiar, was almost more than I could bear. Well, I guess I'll leave you two to it, I said, standing up. As I walked towards the door, something snapped inside me. I turned around and faced Stanley, my anger boiling over. You know, Stanley, you've got some nerve showing up here, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Stanley looked surprised. Hi, I'd... Save it, I interrupted, stepping closer. You come into my house, drink my bourbon, and think it's okay to take my wife away for the weekend? You must be out of your mind. Hi, please, don't make a scene. A scene? You think this is a scene? I laughed bitterly. You haven't seen anything yet. Without another word, I lashed out, my anger and frustration exploding in a violent kick to Stanley's groin. He doubled over in pain, his glass shattering on the floor. As he fell forward, I kneed him in the jaw, sending him sprawling onto the porch. He lay there, unconscious, a mixture of blood and vomit pooling around him. I stood over him, my chest heaving. The red haze of anger began to clear, and I looked at Suri, who stood frozen in shock. Hi, what have you done? She whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked back inside, closing the door behind me. I locked it, turning the key twice, and leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. Suri, please look outside, I said loudly through the closed door. You see a man coming. He has some information for you. A few moments later, I heard a voice outside. Mrs. Suri Bismer, you've been served. There was a thud behind the door, and I knew Suri had collapsed. The reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. I stood there, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. The confrontation was over, but the fallout had just begun. As I walked back to the living room, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The storm had hit, and now it was time to pick up the pieces and move on. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt eerily quiet. I woke up in the office, the pull-out bed offering little comfort. The events of the previous night play over and over in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Stanley lying unconscious on the porch or the look of shock on Shuri's face. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping a cup of coffee might clear my head. As I poured myself a mug of coffee, the front door opened. Suri walked in, her eyes red from crying and her clothes disheveled. "Hi, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I set my coffee down and faced her. "There's nothing left to say. Suri, you made your choice." "I never expected things to go this far," she said, tears filling her eyes. "Well, they did," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You brought Stanley into our home and expected me to be okay with it. What did you think would happen?" I don't know what I thought. She admitted, her voice breaking. "I just needed something different, something new." "And what about us? What about our marriage?" I asked, my frustration evident. "I thought we could get through this, that it wouldn't mean the end," she said, looking down at her feet. I shook my head, the reality of the situation settling in. "Suri, you betrayed my trust. Our marriage can't survive that." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." "I know," I said softly, "but sorry isn't enough to fix this." We stood there in silence, the weight of our words hanging in the air. Finally, Suri broke the silence. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think it's best if you leave," I said, my voice firm. "We need some time apart to figure things out." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I understand. I'll pack my things." As she turned to leave, I felt a pain of sadness. Despite everything, a part of me still cared for her, but I knew that this was the right decision. The next few days were a blur. Suri packed her belongings and moved out, leaving the house feeling even emptier than before. I focused on work, trying to keep my mind occupied. Friends and family reached out, offering support and kind words, but I found it hard to talk about what had happened. One evening, a week after Shuri had left, my friend Mike came over. We sat on the porch, drinking beers and talking about everything except my marriage. "You've been through a lot," Mike said, breaking the silence. "How are you holding up?" I shrugged and took a long sip of my beer. "Some days are better than others. It's just hard to believe this is my life now." "I get that," he replied. "But you're strong. You'll get through this." "Thanks, Mike," I said, appreciating his support. "It's just going to take some time." As the sun set, we sat in comfortable silence, the shared understanding between us more comforting than any words could be. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that I wasn't alone. In the weeks that followed, I began to find a new routine. I redecorated the house, making it feel more like my own space. I reconnected with old friends and started new hobbies, slowly piecing my life back together. One day, as I was walking through the park, I ran into an old colleague, Sarah. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself smiling for the first time in a long while. "Hi, it's really good to see you," she said, her eyes bright. "How have you been?" "I'm getting there," I replied honestly, taking it one day at a time. "Let's grab coffee sometime," she suggested. "Catch up properly." "I'd like that," I said, feeling a spark of hope for the future. The aftermath of the confrontation had been painful and messy, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I walked home, I realized that I was ready to face whatever came next with the support of my friends and the strength I had found within myself. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow on me. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee growing cold as I stared at the stack of papers in front of me, the legal documents that marked the end of my marriage to Suri. It felt surreal, as if the last few weeks had been a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I knew this was the right step. Our marriage had been broken beyond repair, and the confrontation with Stanley had been the final nail in the coffin. But knowing it was right didn't make it any easier. As I sipped my coffee, the doorbell rang. Breaking my thoughts, I opened the door to find a man in a suit standing there, holding a folder. "Mr. Highbismer?" he asked, his expression professional and unreadable. "Yes, that's me," I replied, my heart sinking. "I'm going to serve you these papers," he said, handing me the folder. "Please sign here to acknowledge receipt." I took the folder and signed where he indicated. As I closed the door, the weight of the documents felt heavier, pressing down on me. Suri arrived shortly after, looking sad and resigned. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table with the documents between us. "So, this is it," she said quietly, her voice full of regret. "Yeah, this is it," I replied, my voice steady but heavy. "I want you to know that I never meant for things to end like this," she said, her eyes pleading. I know. Sorry, but it did. And now we have to deal with it, I said, not wanting to drag the conversation out. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm sorry for everything. I really am. I'm sorry too. Sorry, but we have to move forward, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. We went through the documents, each signature feeling like another step away from the life we had once shared. It was a strange mix of relief and sorrow, the finality of it all sinking in. After we finished, Suri stood up, clutching her copy of the papers. I guess this is goodbye then, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I guess it is, I replied, standing up as well. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged me. It was a brief, awkward embrace, but it carried a weight of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Take care, hi, she said, pulling away. You too, Suri, I replied, watching as she walked out the door. I stood there for a moment, the house feeling emptier than ever. The legal blow had been dealt, and there was no going back. It was time to start a new chapter, even if I wasn't quite sure what that would look like. As the days passed, I focused on the practicalities of moving on. I contacted a lawyer, sorted through our finances, and started making plans for the future. It was a slow, painful process, but each step felt like a small victory. One evening, I called my sister Jane. She had been a rock of support through all of this, and I needed her advice. Hey, Jane, I said when she answered. Got a minute to talk? Of course. Hi, how are you holding up? She asked, her voice full of concern. Honestly, it's been rough. I admitted, but I'm getting through it. I'm glad to hear that. You're stronger than you think, she said, her words comforting. Thanks, Jane. I needed to hear that, I replied, feeling a bit lighter. We talked for a while, and her familiar voice and practical advice helped lift some of the weight off my shoulders. By the time we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The next day, I met with my lawyer to finalize some details. As we went over the documents, I couldn't help but think about what lay ahead. It was daunting, but also full of possibilities. You're making the right choices here, my lawyer said reassuringly. This is a fresh start. I know. It's just hard to see it that way right now, I replied. Give it time. Things will get better, he said with a kind smile. As I left his office, I took a deep breath, feeling a glimmer of hope. The legal blow had been hard, but it was also a necessary step towards healing. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that each day would bring me closer to the new life I was starting to build. The first few weeks after Shuri moved out were the hardest. The house felt strange and empty without her presence. I found myself wandering through the rooms, memories flooding back with every step. But life had to go on, and I knew I needed to find a way to move forward. I started by making small changes around the house. I repainted the living room a calming blue, a color that felt like a fresh start. I rearranged the furniture, creating a space that felt more like my own. It was therapeutic, a way to reclaim my environment and make it reflect the new chapter of my life. One Saturday morning, I decided to tackle the backyard, which had been neglected for far too long. As I pulled weeds and trimmed bushes, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The physical work was a welcome distraction, and it gave me a sense of control in a time that felt overwhelmingly chaotic. While I was working, my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, walked over. He was an older man, always kind and friendly. Morning. Hi. That yard's looking good, he said, leaning on the fence. Thanks, Mr. Thompson. It's a work in progress, I replied, wiping the sweat from my forehead. Yeah, I can see that. Say, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? My wife's making her famous lasagna, he offered with a warm smile. I'd like that. Thanks, Mr. Thompson, I said, feeling grateful for the invitation. Dinner at the Thompsons was just what I needed. Their home was filled with laughter and warmth, a big contrast to the emptiness I've been feeling. We talked about everything and nothing, and the easy conversation was a balm to my weary soul. How are you really doing? Hi? Mrs. Thompson asked gently as we sat around the table. It's been tough, I admit, but I'm trying to take it one day at a time. You're doing great. Hi. It's okay to take it slow, she said kindly. Their support was invaluable, and it reminded me that I wasn't alone. There were people who cared about me, who were willing to lend a hand when I needed it most. As the weeks turned into months, I found new routines and rediscovered old passions. I started going to the gym again, something I had neglected during the turmoil of my marriage. The physical exertion was a release, a way to channel my emotions into something positive. One evening at the gym, I ran into an old friend, Tom. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we picked up right where we left off. Hi, it's been ages. How have you been? Tom asked, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, Tom, it's been a rough time, but I'm getting through it," I replied honestly. "Yeah, I heard about what happened. I'm really sorry, man. But hey, if you ever want to hang out or need someone to talk to, I'm here," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that," I said, feeling a wave of gratitude. We started meeting up regularly, grabbing coffee or catching a movie. It felt good to reconnect, to have someone who understood and could offer a distraction from the heaviness of my thoughts. One afternoon, as we sat in a cafe, Tom brought up an idea. "Hi, have you ever thought about trying something new? Like picking up a new hobby or taking a class?" he suggested. "I don't know. What did you have in mind?" I asked, curious. "There's this cooking class I've been thinking about." "It could be fun and a good way to meet new people," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You know what? That actually sounds like a great idea," I said, feeling a spark of excitement. The cooking class turned out to be a fantastic decision. It brought together people from all walks of life, each with their own reasons for being there. We laughed, learned, and shared stories over simmering pots and chopping boards. One evening, while we were cleaning up after class, I found myself talking to Sarah, a fellow classmate. "Hi, you got a real knack for this," she said, nodding towards the pasta I had just made. "Thanks, Sarah. I'm really enjoying it," I replied with a smile. "Me too. It's nice to do something different, isn't it?" she said, her eyes twinkling. "Yes, it really is," I agreed, feeling a sense of connection. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. Moving on wasn't easy, but with the support of friends, old and new, and the courage to try new things, I was starting to see a brighter future. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined my life. I was finding my way, one step at a time, and that was enough. Months had passed since Shuri left, and life had started to settle into a new rhythm. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary. I had repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and filled the space with things that brought me joy. It felt like my own place, a reflection of the new chapter in my life. One sunny Saturday morning, I decided to visit the farmer's market downtown. It was something Shuri and I used to do together. But this time I went alone, ready to create new memories. As I wandered through the stalls, the vibrant colors and lively atmosphere lifted my spirits. I picked up some fresh vegetables, a loaf of artisan bread, and a jar of homemade jam. It felt good to indulge in small pleasures. "Hyde, is that you?" a familiar voice called out. I turned around to see Sarah, my cooking class friend, smiling warmly at me. "Sarah, what a surprise. How are you?" I replied, genuinely happy to see her. "I'm great, just picking up some fresh produce for the week." "How about you?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Same here. It's a beautiful day for it," I said, holding up my bag of goodies. "Hey, why don't we grab a coffee and catch up?" she suggested. "Sounds perfect." I agreed. We found a cozy cafe nearby and settled into a corner table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the hum of conversation created a comforting backdrop. "So, how have you been really?" Sarah asked, her expression sincere. "I've been good." "It's been a journey, but I'm finding my way," I replied, feeling honest. "I'm glad to hear that. You seem lighter and more at peace," she said, looking into my eyes. "I think I am. It's taken time, but I'm starting to see the good in this new beginning," I said, sipping my coffee. Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful." "Hi, you deserve happiness." "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. As we chatted, I realized how much I enjoyed her company. She was kind, understanding, and had a way of making me feel at ease. When we finally parted ways, I felt a sense of anticipation for the future. Back at home, I decided to try out a new recipe from our cooking class. The kitchen, once a place of shared memories, was now a space where I could create new ones. I chopped vegetables, simmered sauces, and lost myself in the process. Later that evening, as I sat down to a delicious homemade meal, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The house was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, filled with the promise of new beginnings. The following week, I received a call from my lawyer. "Hi, I just wanted to let you know that everything is finalized. The divorce is official," he said. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied, a mix of emotions washing over me. "How are you feeling about it?" he asked, his tone concerned. "I'm okay. It's a relief, honestly." "I'm ready to move on," I said, realizing it was the truth. "That's good to hear. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call," he said. "I appreciate that." Thanks for everything, I said before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, letting the reality sink in. It was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had come to a close. But in its place, a new chapter was beginning, one filled with hope and possibility. A few days later, I received a text from Sarah. Hey, a few of us from the cooking class are getting together this weekend for a potluck. We'd love for you to join us. I smiled, feeling excited. Count me in, I replied. The potluck was a joyful event. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's cooking. It reminded me of the beauty of community and the power of new connections. As the evening ended, Sarah and I found ourselves alone on the porch, with the cool night air around us. I'm really glad you came tonight, she said softly. Me too, Sarah. This has been one of the best nights I've had in a long time, I admitted. Here's to many more, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I said, clinking my glass with hers. As we looked up at the starry sky, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been tough, but it had brought me to this moment of new beginnings, filled with hope, friendship, and the promise of a brighter future. Moving on wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about embracing the present and looking forward to the future. For the first time in a long while, I was truly excited about what was to come. Second story, I'm a 32-year-old woman who's been with my boyfriend since 2022. We met through friends and felt a strong connection right away. I got married in 2016 through an arranged marriage, but my husband was an alcoholic, abusive, and violent. Coming from a conservative family, I tried hard to make the marriage work. But when the abuse became frequent and I started fearing for my life, I decided to end it and filed for divorce. In my country, divorce is very difficult and the legal process is tough. In 2022, I met my ex, let's call him John. We started dating and developed feelings for each other. He didn't know about my past at first. I told him I had been in an abusive relationship, but when I felt ready to share that I was divorced, he had a strong reaction and we stopped talking for a week. Even though we don't live together, we spend a lot of time together since we're in the same city. After apologizing for his reaction, we got back to being okay, or so I thought. Recently, his family started asking about marriage and found some potential matches. John said he talked about me to his family and that everything would be fine. A few days ago, while spending a weekend together, the topic of marriage came up, and he confessed that he had cheated on me during our fights. He blamed me for not giving him enough sex, lying about my past, or other reasons like wanting to check if everything was working properly or not finding me attractive enough. I was heartbroken. I trusted him with my vulnerabilities, knowing how much my past abuse had affected me. Why did he cheat instead of just breaking up with me if he didn't want to stay?